Hello, my name's Dr Alex Allinson and I'm standing again for the seat of Ramsey.
Why are you seeking re-election?
Yeah, I went into this for one term to try to make a difference, make a change, and I've managed to achieve some things, but not everything, partly because of the slow process of government and getting change achieved, but obviously the last 14 months have been extremely disruptive for the Isle of Man and the world in general. There's still a lot of unfinished business and I want to be part of putting that right.
Well, you mentioned there some of the things that you wanted to change. You did make a series of promises in your manifesto last time out, one of which was around abortion reform. This was something you brought as a private member's bill. It's been in place now for a couple of years. Is it what you pictured when you put that legislation forward?
The legislation, absolutely. I still stand by it. I think it's a very good bill. It's enabling and it's future-proofed. But what we need to do is make sure with any legislation we pass that it's actually enacted and we get the right outcomes that we wanted right at the start. One of the things I've done since then is ask one of the Tynwald committees to look into the operation of the bill, and they're due to report in Tynwald. Now, we've still got a lot of work to do. The legislation is the first part, but when you're providing services for people, you need to make sure that they're constantly reviewed and we constantly take the opinions of the people who use those services, not just in terms of abortion, throughout government. We need to make sure that when we pass legislation, we review that, we make sure it's delivering, because what I think people want is a government that delivers, and I want to be part of that in the future.
You did also make an election promise around drug reform, in particular legalising cannabis for personal use. Again, this went out to consultation. That hasn't happened, though. Why has that not come to fruition?
And again, I think that's a good example of what started off as quite a progressive move. I was working in the Department of Home Affairs at the time. We did a full consultation. We got a lot of buy-in from the public to make some radical changes. Then everything slowed down. Everything went into treacle. What we have done since then is actually looked at the medicinal use of cannabis, managed to get a licensing regime on the island for the production of it, but there's a long way to go in terms of making sure that people who would benefit from medicinal cannabis get access to it. Again, that's the outcome we should be aiming for, not just passing the legislation. We also need to absolutely look at the legalisation of drugs, because at the moment we are criminalising sections of the population, particularly those with medical conditions who need these drugs, but also large proportions of young people, criminalising them for something that actually does very little harm to either them or wider society. So certainly one of the things that I'm going to be campaigning on is drug reform. I went into politics wanting to make changes. It has been an incredibly slow process, and that's why I'm standing again actually to finish the job I started in 2016.
Well, speaking about the reform in general there for drugs, you talk about the lack of social impact potentially, but do we know what that would be if you made drugs more readily available and easier to get your hands on?
There's been a lot of really good research looking at the harms drugs do to society in general and to individuals. The most harmful drug in our society is alcohol. If you go into A&E any Saturday night, most of the people who are there because of alcohol-related problems, whether it be accidents or violence. But we permit that because it's legal. One of the things from the recent legislation that's been brought through in terms of licensing is looking at minimum unit price of alcohol, and whether the next administration wants to bring this in to actually look at how we deal with a whole range of drugs, but also part of that has to be the support services for that quite small minority of people who become dependent to drugs, whether that's alcohol or what we now class as illegal drugs, because certainly our drug and alcohol teams do a fantastic job, but I think they need more resources to actually spread that work out a little bit more and support people right the way through their recovery.
Within your constituency, you wanted to create jobs, you wanted to bring more businesses to Ramsey, you wanted to bring some government offices to Ramsey as well. I don't live in Ramsey. As an outsider looking in, I see a shop that's having to be demolished, I see marina plans that have stalled. Has this happened?
Yeah, in terms of the regeneration of Ramsey, I think that the Commissioners have done a very good job in terms of Parliament Street itself. There's a really vibrant atmosphere there, but there have been issues. I think you're quite right. The courthouse, which was a big issue at the start of this administration, looks like it might be put up for sale because of the work of the Commissioners and myself and the other MHK for Ramsey, Laurie Hooper. That is now in public ownership through the Commissioners, but there still needs to be development of it. You talk about the high street itself. We do have some derelict buildings in Ramsey, as we have throughout the Isle of Man, and we need to look at those more proactively. One of the issues I've had with development is planning. Either not registering buildings that should be kept for posterity, or registering buildings which actually probably shouldn't be kept but are obstructing further development. And I think we need to be far more clever in terms of using brownfield sites and how we develop. You talk about the marina, and obviously back 2 years ago now there was a public meeting in terms of the marina development and ideas for it. I still yet have seen that to go further, but apparently the consortium are going to be presenting plans to the population in Ramsey and obviously the rest of the island with ideas later on in the summer. I'd like to see those be analysed. I'd like to see decent environmental impact surveys and it to go through a complete, open and transparent planning process, because there are some people in Ramsey who are very much in favour of a coastal marina development, but some people who are vehemently against it. And we need to get all the facts out there so people can make a right, balanced decision about what the future of their town should look like.
So sticking with your constituency then, what is the main priority for the next 5 years?
The main priority is the same as it's always been. Irrespective of COVID, people want to live in a nice, safe environment, and we've got community policing starting up again throughout our neighbourhoods, but particularly in Ramsey. We've got a functioning police station there, which is really important, and I think we've got some really good people there and volunteers who are keeping the streets safe and clean for us. But also they want that vibrancy, and actually I've been really heartened by the number of new businesses that have come into Ramsey to take on efforts such as the farmers market, such as retail and also food commerce, and actually bringing buying local to a reality in Ramsey. But we must invest in the infrastructure. We do have some poor roads in Ramsey. We've got the coastal defences that need to be built up. We've got the harbour defences that need to be built up because we're one of the at-risk flood areas on the island. But more than that, we need to invest more in our schools and particularly health service. There have been real issues with health service provision during the pandemic, which I think have shone a light onto some of the stresses, particularly in terms of primary health care, access to GP practices, and also access to additional services such as physiotherapy and counselling. Now with Manx Care and on the back of the coronavirus pandemic, we have the opportunity to make things better and certainly invest in that essential infrastructure in terms of health and education, because we do have an increasing population in Ramsey. There's lots of new building going up. We need to make sure that when we attract people to Ramsey, we have the right services to provide for them and their families.
And what about the priorities on a national scale?
On a national scale, again, the priorities are similar. It's looking after people, it's looking after the infrastructure, it's investing in the future. But what we've seen over the last 14 months is the coronavirus pandemic has shone a light on some of the divisions in our society, some of the inequalities there that have been papered over. So we've seen people who, when they lose their job, they have no savings to fall back onto. They have no safety net at all. The priorities for the next administration have to be to build up a far more resilient service, to look at the benefit system, to increase wages, to increase employment, to increase affordable housing, so that if we have a shock again, as we've had over the last 14 months, people can survive it. We really now have, I think, a real opportunity, for once-in-a-generation opportunity, to build back, to actually improve the situation, at the same time as tackling some of the other major problems that haven't gone away, such as climate change. And so if we can do that in a coherent way, investing not only in the infrastructure, but investing in the people of the Isle of Man, I think we can make a real difference over the next 5 years.
You mentioned there climate change as one of the priorities. You've spent a chunk of this administration as chairman of Manx Utilities. So in terms of renewable energy, why haven't we got more there?
We've got some of the initial ideas about renewable energy. One of the issues in Manx Utilities going into it was the historical debt that needs to be paid off. So what we're doing really with Manx Utilities at the moment is using natural gas as a transition fuel, but we also know that by 2035 the power station at Paul Rose will need replacement. What I did as chairman was to try to encourage that initial viewpoint in terms of renewables, in terms of what we replace it with, but also invest in a far more resilient grid system so that we could use renewables and microgeneration to export energy both around the island but also over to the UK. The other thing we invested in heavily was EV charging points, and having an increasing network of those across the island. But certainly when you're talking about renewable energy, what we need to do over the next couple of years, and it is that shorter period of time, is as a country look at what we want. Do we want wind turbines on the Isle of Man? Do we want solar panels on every roof? Or would we rather have large offshore wind farms and large solar arrays in various parts of the island? So it's going to be that mix between micro and macro generation, which I think is incredibly important if we're going to hit our targets. And personally, although we've got the target by 2050, I think we need to be aiming before that, but we need to be doing so in a way that brings everyone along. So it's not just the energy we create, it's the energy we use, and actually giving people grants to improve their homes so that we can hit our targets for climate change, but also eradicate fuel poverty at the same time.
Now, for the last 15 months or so of the administration, you've served in the Council of Ministers as the Minister for Education, Sport and Culture. When that opportunity came along, did you instantly think, yes, I want to serve as a minister, or was there some hesitancy?
I mean, I was incredibly honoured to be voted in as MHK, but to be offered a ministerial role is a great privilege. So I didn't think twice about accepting that when it was offered to me. I completely understood some of the problems in education, some of the history with that, and some of the challenges ahead. Unfortunately, within 3 weeks of becoming education minister, I had to close all the schools down because of the coronavirus pandemic, and that's actually inhibited some of the progressive changes I was really quite keen to do with staff at the department, with the staff in our schools. We've got some incredibly talented teachers and support staff, and actually listening to them, that's where the answers lie for many of the problems we face. But certainly, it's been a real privilege to serve in education, and at the moment what I'm trying to do is consolidate some of those ideas that we've developed over the last year to make sure that the progress we've made continues right the way through the next decade.
Well, you mentioned some of the problems within education when you arrived. There was the pay dispute with the teachers, there was the Beeman's report that was ongoing at that time, and elsewhere in the department, obviously the flumes as well. Yeah. Are you leaving the department, assuming you don't return as Education Minister, are you leaving the department in a better state than when you arrived?
Yes. I personally think I am, but that's in some ways for others people to judge. What we've done is radically look at the department, and one of the main problems there was communication and culture. It was not trusting and valuing the people who worked for the department, and I think we've corrected that on the back of the Beeman's review to change the whole emphasis of the department, so it's there to support education, not to direct education. In terms of the flumes, that's one of several different infrastructure projects that became mired with complexities. And what we've tried to do as a department, and I'm not taking necessary credit for it, but it's making sure that officers and members of staff get the chance to correct some of those problems that were there, to actually move forward. And so hopefully we can settle the flumes and the entire NSC project fairly quickly, but then move on to address some of the other key projects which are improving the infrastructure in our schools, looking at those schools that need work doing to them to make them a better learning environment for the children and young people who use them.
You did receive some criticism ahead of ahead of your decision on going into the third lockdown around the decision not to close schools earlier than actually came to fruition. There was some criticism in Keys and also from the public as well. Do you regret that decision with hindsight?
As a minister, as a politician, as an individual, you are always going to get criticism when you're making difficult decisions. And I have to accept that and justify what we did. At the time, that was absolutely the right decision on the data that we had, and I still stand by that decision. What we have to do in terms of the council ministers is make incredibly difficult decisions which really affect people's lives, and that was especially in terms of the last 14 months when we are intruding on people's personal lives, their family lives, telling them to stay at home, telling them to leave their work, and locking down our entire economy. Nobody makes those decisions lightly. We always review them, but I think we've made the right decisions at the right time for our nation.
Where do you see yourself in the next administration if you are re-elected? Would you want to serve as Chief Minister?
In terms of the next administration, that's up to the gift of the people of Ramsey. I've got to regain their trust. I've got to make sure that they understand that I'm working for them. If I get in September, then I'll look at the opportunities. And the opportunities will be there, whether to be minister, whether to be chief minister. I think all of us coming into the next administration need to hit the ground running. We've got some serious work to do for this country and for the people who get us in there. And also we've got to roll our sleeves up and be prepared to do some work and get our hands dirty. There are some politicians who want to go into politics to ask questions all the time, to sit on committees and write reports. I've come into politics to make a difference, to make change, and to try to achieve the right outcomes, both for the people of Ramsey and also the people of the Isle of Man. If I get the opportunity to stand for Chief Minister, yes, I would absolutely stand, because I think that that's a good way of realigning the policies of the Isle of Man, the policies of the government, the whole direction of change, so that we can achieve the best possible outcomes for our people.
Would that hinder your ability to represent people in Ramsey, though, if your hands are tied with central government?
I think anyone going into a leadership role, whether it be going into a department or going into a ministerial role, in some ways, yes, they have to focus on the wider picture, but we still have absolutely the ability to advocate for our constituents. Even though I'm Education Minister, I'm dealing with housing issues, I'm dealing with infrastructure issues, potholes, problems with people with immigration issues. That is our role. We are local politicians having sometimes to take on national or even international roles, and I relish that. Yes, we're busy, but no, we can do all those roles. We can take on all those responsibilities because that's what the constituents vote us in to do.
So what would you say your proudest moment of the last 5 years has been?
The proudest moment was actually being elected by the people of Ramsey to serve them in 2016. Other than that, what I've been trying to do is work with large groups of other people to achieve effective change. Changing the abortion laws on the Isle of Man was again an incredibly proud moment, but I was even prouder for the number of women who stood up for their rights, who have campaigned for that legislation for years, and I was just luckily the conduit for that to get that changed. So there's been a whole range of proud moments, sitting on Tynwald Hill and just contemplating the history of this incredible island that we live on. You know, it's been a privilege to serve as minister. It's been absolutely an honour to serve the people of Ramsey. And every day brings a new challenge, but also a new opportunity to actually make a difference for people. And some of my constituents, just a small thing I've done to try to help them, has made a massive effect on their lives. And that's actually what I'm most proud of, is being able to touch people's lives and hopefully improve it for the better.
And on the flip side, your biggest regret?
My biggest regret was perhaps not forcing or trying to force things through sooner. I think most politicians, when they get in to the House of Keys, think they've got 5 years to change things. It's taken a remarkably long period of time to affect change. Even the abortion reform bill took an extra year longer than I thought. You've touched on drug law reform. I regret that I wasn't more forceful with that. I tried to work with the Constabulary, with the Attorney General, with the Department of Health and Social Care to try to get medicinal cannabis freely available. I'm now at the end of 5 years and we still haven't got to that stage. So that's been one of my main regrets in terms of the pace of change and not being able to achieve those. That's why I want to stand again, to finish off the work that I started and also fulfil the promises I gave to the people of Ramsey back in 2016.